Hi, this is Mark Graban. I'm a senior advisor with KaiNexus, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled Pets and Vets, Applying Lean in Unexpected Places. And I'm very happy to be joined today by our presenter, a friend of mine here from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Chip Ponsford. Dr. Ponsford graduated from Texas A&M in 1980, owned a small animal hospital in El Paso for 27 years. He spent 5 years with a national corporate practice as chief of staff and was a top 20 producer. For several years, Dr. Ponsford has studied the Toyota system, or Lean, and how it might be applied to veterinary medicine. Chip and I have collaborated on some articles on Lean in veterinary medicine. We've spoken at the 2016 Texas Veterinary Medicine Association Convention. Dr. Ponsford has started the only blog dedicated to Lean in veterinary medicine at www.leanvets.com, and he currently lives and works in the Dallas area. And I'm really excited that Chip is going to be talking about some of the current state of Lean in veterinary medicine and some of the promise that's still ahead. So before handing things off to Chip, I've really enjoyed getting to know him the last couple of years, his questions and his learning and his diligence about exploring Lean in healthcare. I had a chance to visit and observe in his practice once, and allergies aside, I enjoyed it and learned a lot. Now, when I first got involved in healthcare in 2005, everybody would say things like, Lean doesn't apply to us. We build cars, we're different. And people still say that in healthcare and hospitals, but Lean applies anyway. Now, about 2 years ago, I had a chance to spend a week doing an assessment at a university medical center where they're teaching and training veterinarians. And this was in what they called their large animal clinic. So as you see pictured here, horses and cows and pigs and llamas. And when people working there heard about my background in healthcare, they said, again, we're different. So if you go to the next slide, though. So when I was there for the week, I heard the phrase human healthcare for the first time. I thought I'd always just called it healthcare, as many of us in the audience had probably done. But I think it goes to show how different people view the same thing through different lenses. We call what Chip does veterinary medicine. And I learned that some in veterinary medicine refer to what they do as multi-species medicine, which is also kind of an eye-opening phrase for me. So think about the complexity and the differences. People in human healthcare will often say, every patient is unique, but we're all the same species. So there's more variation in veterinary medicine, as Chip is going to talk about today. So, final thought, the beauty of Lean is that it's not a system for building cars. It's a set of methods, a management system, it's a philosophy, it's an integrated system and a culture that can be applied in so many different settings, as we've heard from different KaiNexus webinar presenters who are working in the realms of government, finance, law firms, healthcare, manufacturing. Lean is lean. So with that, I will turn things over to Chip.
Thank you very much, Mark. Welcome to everybody. I hope this turns out to be informative and we can have some good questions at the end. I'm counting on lots of questions at the end. One of the first things I was ever taught by Mark was Ono's concept of start from need. And one of the things that I'm going to try and show you in this webinar is kind of where we're at in veterinary medicine and economically and practice-wise and stuff like that, and that I hope I can demonstrate that we do have a need. This slide also is important to me, as Mark often is reminding me that we have to pull, and that's been very frustrating so far for me in this area. There just isn't enough information out there about Lean to where there are people who are asking for it. So that's been the real dilemma and the difficulty is getting the information out so that people can have an understanding of what's going on. So the current state, where are we at right now? These slides are from the TVMA presentation that Mark and I gave a couple years ago. The information's a little bit old, but I think it's still valid. Compensation for veterinarians is going down. And expenses for young veterinarians are so much higher than they were for me. I think I went through all of college and veterinary school, lived in in an apartment and paid room and board for about a total of about $50,000. Now these young students, these young veterinarians are coming out with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and that, as we'll see, will impacts what they're able to do as far as practice. So in terms of, we're just behind. We're behind in our income. When I first started out and opened my own practice, the business side of veterinary medicine was just starting to take hold. The idea that veterinary medicine was a business was brand new. And at that time, the emphasis was on marketing veterinary medicine as a legitimate profession, and that veterinarians deserve to earn a similar income to other professionals. When we go through veterinary medicine and we go through our schooling, I had to take the same, all of us had to take the same exact classes in order to apply and get into veterinary school as I would have if I wanted to go into medical school. Yet in Texas, there are at least 5 or 6 or more medical schools to apply to. There's only one veterinary school in Texas, and they only take 144. So the competition is very high, and the idea was that we deserved to be compensated for our work and our knowledge and our skills. What has happened, though, I think, and I'll talk about it later, is that maybe we've swung too far to one side. The economy is improving right now. Back when we gave this thing, we were just coming out of the recession. And so one of the things that lean organizations do when times are slow is they get leaner. They educate their staff. They go through their value streams and reevaluate and maybe get into a system of cross-training and stuff like that, so that when the good times do come back, they're up and ready and even more competitive than they were before, and not just sit around and moan and groan and ask why. One of the things that that we have in veterinary medicine that has come up over the last several years, and it's getting worse and worse actually, is this concept of Dr. Google. I don't know if on the human side they have this. I'm sure they do. I've seen, WebMD and all sorts of sites. So we're finding out that a lot of pet owners now are going to the internet to get their information. 39% of pet owners report looking online first before they talk to a veterinarian, and 15% report relying less on their veterinarian. And the problem is, if the clinical signs of the problem with that pet resolve in a day or two, veterinarians are not seeing those pets at all anymore. And as I alluded to, the sticker shock, we've kind of, I think, have been our own worst enemies. this increasing our income and professionalism and stuff, and hopefully giving value back at the same time, has created a void, and I'll talk about this, like I said, in just a little bit. But 26% of the veterinarians from the Bayer Veterinary Care Usage Study a couple of years ago would switch to veterinarians if it was less expensive. So the loyalty is not to the practice, the loyalty is to the price. One of the two lowest scores that practices received was value for service. Well, if there's anything that lean is about, it's about giving value to the customer. In a benchmark, the benchmark reported in 2013 in this one article by Mark Graban. Mark Graban is a long time practice consultant. He was one of the first in the area back then when we were trying to get veterinarians to think about practice as not just a medical office, but as a business. And he said that the benchmark for retained clients is 60% at 18 months. And I thought that was pretty low. If that's what we're shooting for, then that's not a good thing. We ought to be shooting for, 100%. We ought to be we should be looking for 100%. Strive for perfection and find excellence. There's also been quite a bit of veterinary medicine has changed quite a bit since I started. When I got out, there was very little specialty practice. If you wanted to be a board certified specialist in veterinary medicine, you were basically committing yourself to academia. But that's not the case anymore. Now we've got emergency clinics with board certified emergency and critical care veterinarians. We've got multidiscipline, large referral hospitals that have veterinary neurologists, veterinary ophthalmologists, veterinary surgeons, veterinary internal medicine, just about any kind of specialty that you can think of in human medicine. We now have board certified specialists, and they have been coming together now and making or building these very large, sophisticated small animal referral centers, and I welcome that. I mean, that's been great for the profession. But the other things that have happened, because the price and everything else, is that we've seen a lot of low-cost spay and neuter clinics. Spays and neuters are used to be anyway, one of the bread and butter services for veterinarians, and that has been taken away by practices that want to specialize in that and can do high volume at low cost. Low-cost vaccination clinics, the same reason. You can see almost, I think, in any city now, parked outside of a pet store or just in a mall, these vans that are willing to, do vaccinations only. They won't talk to you about sick animals. They won't help you with your problems. They won't do any help with any, can't do surgery or dispense medicine. But they'll give, 2 injections or 2 or 3 injections and send you on the way and charge a less fee. Clinics and hospitals located within pet stores. Banfield was kind of the first. Now Petco has entered into an agreement with a corporation to put pet stores or veterinary hospitals into their pet stores. And there's even some word now of Walmart wanting to get into the business. So that's kind of where we are on a systems or a profession basis. One of the other things that's kind of affected is the population of veterinarians. when I got into veterinary school, there was probably about 60% males and 40% females, and that was changing. I mean, several years before that, it was, you know, traditionally veterinary medicine has been mostly a male profession, but now it's almost 95% female. And I'm not saying that's good, or I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that it has affected the way veterinary medicine can be run. They, as females, they typically, and I'm not trying to stereotype or anything like that, but what we found in trying to hire people for practices that I've been involved with is that the females want to have a more balance of life, and that's kind of the millennial mindset, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. We all need to have probably a better balance of what we do. I know that my career would have been a lot easier if I'd you know, been better at balancing my life. So, but that's really become a big part of what new graduates are wanting. They want to be able to have family. They want to be able to, you know, to bring children and raise them and stuff like that. But it's hard to do that and work full time in a veterinary practice. And like I mentioned before, the school debt, the amount of debt that these new students are coming out with almost completely precludes them from being able to afford their own practice. So they don't typically want to own. The other thing about millennials is that they don't want to do what their parents did, and that's not have that balance between home life and career. They are, the females also, for whatever reason, are not as comfortable doing surgeries for the most part as the males are or were, and they're much more tech oriented. They want all the big items, the digital X-ray, the ultrasound, laser surgery, the this, that, you know, that sort of thing. If you could have seen the practice that I opened up when I first opened up, it would look like the Stone Age at this point. Yet it was functional, and I think we're going to have to go back to at least some of that model to get us where we need to be. At any rate, a little bit about the practitioners now. This is it's a fictional story inspired by actual events. Any similarity, this caveat, any similarity to actual persons, living or deceased, or my current employer is completely coincidental. Now, having said that, this is just a conglomerate of a typical veterinary practitioner now, I think. Graduated several years ago, has owned a small animal hospital in a growing suburban area for the last 10 years, has you know, a couple of full-time vets and some help. He's got a freestanding hospital. In other words, it's not in a strip center or something like that, which is a lot more, depending on where you are, is a lot more common. And it's what I would call typically furnished and equipped. It's got all the necessary things to do a reasonable job at seeing sick animals and performing the necessary surgeries. He's progressive and he's quality medicine oriented. He's got all the new social media presence that seems to be necessary these days. His fees are above average for the area, but he's and so he's not comfortable raising them at this time. Expenses continue to rise, however. The practice is growing, but leveling off as business does, especially if you're not continually improving and continually innovating. Returning clients may be slightly down. Management, in other words, he is becoming more frustrating and is starting to affect his physical and emotional health. one of the things that you may be surprised to hear is that of all the professions, veterinary medicine has the highest suicide rate. And there's lots of possible reasons for that. But that's kind of a fact. Recurring staff and client issues, which is always a part of any kind of small business. And friendly staff, but compared to some of his other staff or other practices around, he's got higher than normal turnover. He has difficulty getting his staff engaged, to take the initiative and to be more self-motivated. Training new employees seems to be more difficult than it should be. Communication between doctors and staff is difficult. We just don't seem to be on the same page, he says. Wonders if there's some new paradigm that will help solve problems, improve systems and culture now and into the future. And of course, my position is, yes, we're right here. We've been trying to explain all this, that yes, we've got a system and it's called Lean, and Lean will help and fix all of that you've got going on right now. Plus, it's a system to get you into the future, even if the future changes. This is a slide from an economic survey that was published in AVMA. The AVMA has economic summits every once in a while, and this was just kind of a review of what's said. It's not important necessarily that you know who these people are, but it was interesting to me that they're identifying all these problems, and I can't seem to get any kind of voice into the profession to be able to at least look at Lean as a possible solution. 20% of the practices had sources of revenue similar to those practices and collectively, and charged similar prices. The difference was in expense management, resource utilization. Dr. Karen Feldstein's a veterinarian and practice manager. She's an MBA. Said that veterinarians need leadership, management, financial, and communication skills. Many resources are available, but veterinarians are still struggling. Well, let's take a look at Lean. Lean's a system. It's a standardized work. It's teachable. It's learnable. And it's a complete system. Opportunities in such areas as devising new business models, leveraging technology, providing access at convenient times, and consolidating capital expenditures among groups of veterinarians. Well, these are the kind of problems that Lean is made for. The objective, scientific pursuit of answers, experimentation, reflection, and making what changes need to be changed. In the American Animal Hospital Association survey, 53% of the respondents who raised prices did so because costs have risen. And he asked, can services be provided at a lower cost? I saw a gentleman named Mitch Aber. He was he's an economist and statistician and stuff. He made a comment about raising prices in an article that I read in one of the economic journals for veterinary medicine. And his position was that if inflation is 3% or less, you have no right to increase fees, that you need to be finding ways to reduce expenses at that rate. Michael Dix was the head of the economic committee for the AVMA. I had a brief conversation with him on emails. He likes the idea of the Kaizen idea and the idea of starting from need. He says the difference between need and what is actually happening is all blue ocean and is a 5-fold greater space than what is currently occurring. Well, AHA puts out a training session to teach. It's a veterinary practice institute that teaches veterinarians and their staff to how to run a practice. When I was in school, we didn't get a lot of practice management. We got about an hour twice or something like that. So we all kind of went out and in the dark and just kind of did it as we saw it. Now there's more available. But we're not seeing the bigger picture. None of these AVMA's has started a new training thing for practice management, and both of these are the traditional ways of practicing. The veterinarian, is the leader, and he's the one that does everything, and it's still very much command and control. The idea of involving staff in decisions is just not around. When I first came out, one of the big things that practice management was trying to do was to get veterinarians to just delegate daily services and stuff like running a fecal or pulling blood from an animal or taking the x-ray, from doing that themselves and actually trusting the techs to be able to do those things. And we've made very big progress, and that's one of the things that has helped veterinary medicine tremendously, is this reliance on good, qualified, trained, skilled staff, but then giving them the trust and the responsibility and the environment that they can do their job. So I've talked about this kind of blue ocean type thing, blue ocean, red ocean, from the book. And what I have seen in my career, at least from my perspective, is that we have, as veterinary profession, we have been chasing the upper economic levels of our clients, so that now we're all trying to market and service and attract and keep, the top 25 or so percent of clientele economically and income based. Well, that has left a complete void. And what used to be the red ocean, where we had a few fish and we were all doing pretty well, now we've concentrated ourselves into the top, and there's just a big feeding frenzy. So what used to be our red ocean down at the bottom is now becoming more blue, as veterinary medicine is being attracted to doing a higher level of medicine. And it's not a bad thing necessarily, but we have left behind a good portion of the clientele, I think. And then the blue ocean is the new innovative and creative things. And that's something that needs to occur both in the red ocean and in the old ocean. We need creativity and innovation and new approaches all along the profession. But and so lean in veterinary medicine is still extremely embryonic. But it is starting to be talked about. This is a blog from Mark's lean blog, talking about the early days of lean veterinary medicine when he and I first got together, and some of the articles that he and I wrote to publish in a veterinary journal, an economic management journal for veterinary medicine. One of the things that I was very disappointed about in my experience in dealing with the media and the journals and stuff was we sent them quite a bit of information, and which I felt was necessary to completely understand lean, and it got chopped up quite a bit and almost meaningless by the time it was published. So I have not published anything more in the journals. I may do that again for a different magazine, but I guess now I know a little better, and I'll write it better for them. But these were some of the the articles that we want, trying to get some information out there and at least get the word lean out to veterinarians and have them start thinking about what the possibilities of that meant. Then in a couple of years ago, we got together and we're actually able to get a position for the TVMA convention in San Marcos, Texas. We were given 2.5 hours, and I was thrilled to have 2.5 hours to go before veterinarians and state our case. And what I found out was that 2.5 hours is not enough time. I think that one of the problems, and we'll talk about this as we get along here and some of the other people that are doing this, is what I have seen is that lean is being implemented on a tools basis. And it just, when the system doesn't work because you're only using one or two quote unquote tools from the lean arsenal, that you miss the point, and it's just not going to work. And so my fear is that by going out and talking for just small amounts of time, yes, it might get lean recognized and stuff like that, but I don't want people to think that lean is just 5S or reorganizing a particular area or something like that. I want them to get all the information and to know that this is a system, this is a standardized work, and that it's a mindset, it's a culture that you need to develop. And without all that, it's just not going to work. And if it doesn't work, I don't think that veterinary medicine will give lean a second chance. Excuse me. So one of the things that, like I said, we're starting to see more. Here's just some information that I've picked up over the years about people talking, veterinarians talking and trying to introduce the idea of lean. This is from a convention that they were going to be talking about lean, and you can see that it lasted all of 1 hour. So it makes you wonder what they talk about. And usually what these people are talking about is, like I said, they're talking about value stream maps or our 5S organization, and that then is lean. And that's just not going to cut it. We get these benchmarks of these books that you can buy. They're fairly expensive, from $260 or $275 to be able to get these surveys that are come out every year. This is from the 2015 study of well-managed practices. And it caught my eye that here in chapter 3, you can see is a talk about lean. Now, I didn't buy the benchmarks for well-managed practices back then, but I can only imagine what a small subtitle in a chapter could actually do for teaching lean. We are seeing lean. It is starting to get find a place in veterinary medicine. So far, at least here in the United States, it has been the veterinary hospitals, and there have been several that have done this. Cornell has done some lean work and been very successful with it. The North Carolina Vet College got into lean. The hospital manager there was a lady named Samantha Perrett, and she was able to convince them after several years of having problems between getting the anesthesia department and the surgeries department aligned. the veterinary surgeons were having to stay too long. They weren't getting the work accomplished on a reasonable time so everybody could go home. And after 9 or 10 years of trying to figure this out, she finally convinced them to try lean. They got everybody together, went to the Gemba, went to the site, and did a value stream map, and saw where there were breakdowns in communication, where maybe one department didn't realize what was going on in another department, and so we're able to put the pieces back together in a better flow. And as a consequence, they were able to increase in just one iteration, just one trial, they were able to increase their surgeries during the day by 36%, and that was tremendous for them. So it does work. It's been interesting to me that the veterinary hospitals at the universities, the teaching hospitals, vet schools, are getting in this more than small animal practice. But I think it's because they are, of course, more similar to human health care than a typical veterinary practice. They have got departments. They've got anesthesia departments. They've got surgery departments. They've got internal medicine departments. They've got radiology departments. They've got oncology departments. So there are silos there that probably are not speaking together as well as they should. That's not necessarily the case in a small animal practice where there's 2 or 3 veterinarians, and we're on the floor all the time. The silo problem is not the problem in small animal medicine. The problem in small animal medicine practice right now that I see is getting staff involved, utilizing them, recognize them as an asset, and by doing that, getting them more engaged in the practice. The idea of Kaizen, of continually improving, because everybody's got ideas and everybody has got ways of seeing things and fixing things, and the looking at value streams and trying to eliminate waste. I think the idea of kanbans, of resource utilization, has got some definite purpose and places that they can be used in small animal medicine. But for right now, it seems to be the veterinary hospitals, and I think that's why. This is from an email that I got from Auburn University. They have been doing a lean experiment. They got everybody together, staff, and what they decided was that they were having problems with client communication. So they put together a system, and they focused on the discharge process, that people were getting all the information they need to take care of their animals at home, to know what was going on, and how to, what to look for if they were having problems. And so they put together this lean initiative to do that. And so far, it's been doing very well. So they started cross-training. They're using more visual communication, and they're getting more employee involvement and engagement in identifying the problems, fixing the problems, and therefore feeling a part of the practice. I just recently found out that I'm not the only veterinary lean website anymore. So I'm just going to have to tout that I was the first. But it's also trying to get started in the United Kingdom. Christian Bamber, I think he's probably listening to us right now, has started that. And what the interesting thing was from the email that I got from him is that I told him I could have sent back your email to you to explain what is going on in the United States, and all I would have to do is change US for UK. We're having the same exact problems. It's very early over there. 99.9% of the people don't know about it. Veterinarians tend to be closed off to new ideas. We're very independent, and we think we know everything. The corporate structure coming in and not being very amenable to doing things other than the way they want them done. They're not very open to new ideas and people that want to kind of upset the system. He talks about organizers and publishers not being able to get a chance to speak at any of the conventions and stuff because they just don't understand it and they won't take the time to learn about it. So I thought it was very interesting that what he was reporting back to me is exactly the same things that we're having problems with here. So we've got to get it out. We've got to have the chance to prove ourselves. We need the ability to get some practices involved. We need to experiment, and we need to compare. I firmly believe, hearts of all hearts, that we can a lean practice will outproduce and outpace a traditionally managed practice. There's just I have no doubts about that at all. But the problem is getting these organizations and these conventions and publishers and stuff like that to give you a second chance. So started Lean Vets a couple of years ago. Since then, I've done, I don't know, 52 or something different posts. Mostly my blog is about teaching. It's about educating. It's about teaching what lean is. I don't have a lot of information and articles to go to that, that say that this lean veterinary practice didn't work, and I can make, some comments and critique what veterinary medicine or what lean is doing in other practices, because there aren't any. So my first thought was, I just want my practitioners, my colleagues to understand what lean is and at least give it a chance. Think about it. Maybe there is something here. I believe there is. But getting them to give us a chance has been very difficult. So these are some of the things. Some of the posts that I've had recently are andon cords and environmentalism. I used the andon cord as a symbolism for allowing the staff the opportunity to be smart enough to stop something going on. That the environment has to be a safe environment for staff to speak up and to make mistakes and not be criticized themselves. That lean looks at system problems a whole lot more, and before we ever look at a particular individual problem. Error proofing, trying to get that idea across. We did a post about chart processing and the term is leaving me right now, Mark. Well,
SPC, chip, statistical process control.
Yeah, yes. I'm sorry about that. And so that for me was incredibly, I've not seen anything like this in veterinary medicine yet. It's something that I could have definitely used back when I started out, freaking out of every dip and rise in the stats that we keep. This put it into so much more perspective than I had ever known. So I was very happy to share that with veterinarians. And this is a blog that just kind of explained to them about veterinary medicine being very similar And I think that there is a place for them that both lean and veterinary medicine can fit together very well. This I just got this morning. Last year at this time, we had an all-time history of about 10,000 page views. Just this morning, we had 22,000. So somebody's looking. Just going to go through quickly some of the types of things that I think are valuable in small animal practice. These are just some things that I've done. This is just a very crude value stream map, trying to look at bringing an animal in the morning for a comprehensive exam, tests, annual vaccinations, and getting that flow down. This is a little experiment that I tried. Always wondered why groomers could clip toenails, bathe, clip a dog, and only need one person. Yet it always seemed that it took 2 veterinary technicians to work on any one animal. So I went and got a grooming table, and we hooked them up, and found out that yeah, you can do it with one person. So that helped flow quite a bit. So from this time on, my techs were working by themselves. Inventory, kanban is a problem where I think there's lean has a big solution to. This is one that I set up in a practice I'm at right now. They were constantly running out or whatever. They just didn't have a system at all. And so we put this in, and it's worked out very, very well. I don't think any of the drugs that we have in this particular shelving unit have been have run out. So it's worked well. This is just an example of a 5S, or an organization of a workspace, so that everything is where you need it. Everything you need is there and in the right place and stuff like that. Visual management is a big thing. I think can be introduced. We do some of it, but I think visual management could be improved in veterinary hospitals, small animal, private practices. This is just a treatment board that shows what animals are in the hospital, what doctors are in charge, what treatments they have, what treatment orders have been posted, and what has been accomplished. So anybody can walk by there and theoretically know exactly the condition of all the hospitalized animals. Kanban we use. This is a file that tells us, number one, we've got a client in that room, and that client wishes to see a particular doctor. I'm writing a new book to try and introduce veterinary medicine to lean, and I put this in just because I decided I'm going to. Lean is based on a scientific method. Veterinary medicine is designed on the scientific method. We all know, as veterinarians, we know what our ideal looks like, a healthy pet. We know how to recognize disease. We think in terms of systems already, with endocrine systems and cardiac systems, and every system playing a role in affecting everything else. We know how to diagnose disease. We know how to come up with therapy, but I don't think we've ever thought about that process for a sick practice. And so my hope is that I can introduce lean and make it a little bit more relevant by going in this particular fashion. So this is the table of contents. This is I had way too much time on my hand one day, and so I decided that what we needed was value stream icons for veterinary medicine. So this is my attempt at providing that incredibly important service to my profession. The future state, what I'm hoping for is that we can start having some workshops around the country, maybe getting some corporate sponsorship, not necessarily from corporate veterinary practice, but from the drug manufacturers and the drug distributors and that sort. Enough private practices to embrace the lean mindset and sustaining the culture. We need to get enough data to compare lean practices to traditionally managed practice, so we can make a legitimate decision as to whether lean can help or not. I would like to see lean lexicon as at some point being a part of the overall veterinary management lexicon, and an annual lean veterinary summit where veterinarians that are using lean can come together just like they do in the lean healthcare spectrum, and get together and talk amongst ourselves and learn as a organization, as a profession. And then lastly, as a community of lean practitioners, I think there's a lot of competition. We won't admit it to the outside, but there's a lot of competition between veterinarians, so we don't talk a lot about management. We keep all those things secret. If we've got a special way of doing something, we don't want to talk about it. So I'm hoping that lean will create that sharing environment. And that's it.
Thanks, Chip. What's the image here as we're waiting for more questions to come in?
This is some of my artwork. This is a picture I did, I don't know, a bunch of years ago. So it's just a cat.
All right. Well, it's beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. And if you can go ahead and advance it, Chip, I'll do a few announcements, and then we'll have Q&A. So go ahead, please. So we have webinars coming up in the next couple of months. The next two, the first is May 24th. Jeff Roussel is going to continue our KaiNexus demo series. This is the third in that series, a short demo of strategy deployment software. You can find the first two of those in our webinar library, which you can find at kainexus.com/webinars. That's also the page where you can register for that next one. You can find webinars on our YouTube channel as well if you search for KaiNexus. On May 31st, I'll be hosting another presentation style webinar. Title TBD, registration is probably going to open tomorrow. It'll be a deeper dive on strategy deployment or Hoshin Conry. Craig Veracruz and Joanna Omi from Rona Consulting Group will be following up the first webinar that they did last year that was very popular, very insightful. So we hope you will check out these future webinars. Okay, next please. Other resources, including our blog at blog.kainexus.com, the webinar library. Next please. And our podcasts, which include audio from these webinars and other content at kainexus.com/podcasts. Next, please. And here is Q&A info. So let's see, a question from Ostap. For a practice that's very new to lean, what practical first steps would you recommend?
Well, that's something I've thought about quite a bit. A lot of people feel like going in and teaching a practice about 5S, that's a simple thing. It gets them thinking about lean. It shows them about waste and introduces flow and stuff like that. And I don't have any problem with that. I think if I were going to, when I introduce it to practices, I would rather go from a Kaizen perspective. I want them to set up a Kaizen board. I want the staff to understand what we're asking, that we want them to be involved, that we consider them the greatest asset the practice has, and that they're the only practice that has the potential of appreciating through training and learning and stuff like that. And So we value their input, and the Kaizen board is just a much better way than, I mean, we can do a whole lecture, Mark can, on suggestion boxes and Kaizen boards, but I would start there. And I would start with small little Kaizens just to get them to understand PDS thinking, A3 thinking, doing an A3 report, a small Kaizen project, something like that. Nothing involved, too complicated or anything like that. Just get that idea going, just get that culture started. And then as the problems get brought up, then again, work from need. And if a particular problem needs to do value stream, then we'll introduce value stream. If it needs standardized work, then we'll introduce standardized work. And to then use the tools as needed and go from that direction.
Okay. Another question. There's one slide where you said vets get quote unquote leaner in bad economic times, but they're probably talking about getting smaller and cutting. So how do you battle the difference in definitions of the word leaner?
Well, what the slide wasn't saying that that veterinary practices get leaner. What I was saying is, if you are a lean practice, using that downtime or those bad economic times to work internally and to build up your structure, to improve your value streams, to cross train, to utilize your staff more, to get more Kaizen projects underway and finished. That's what a lean practice would do. They use that time to get quote unquote leaner.
Right, but I think like I see in human healthcare that would get confused where they say, oh, get leaner. Okay, we need to send people home, because the default is cut, and what you're presenting is an alternative to that, right?
Well, yes. I mean, there's, I guess, given in that is that there is this understanding that lean is not about firing people or doing massive reorganizations and layoffs and stuff like that. So within that principle of lean, this is what you do when you've got staff that maybe are not fully engaged in the business. There's still things that they can do that will ultimately pay dividends in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question from Janine. Thank you for the information. As you mentioned, I think having time is a serious problem in veterinary practice. Do you have any ideas about how to incorporate and sustain lean next to the normal veterinary tasks? Well, I guess you just addressed that, of using downtime, slow times. Any other thoughts you'd add, though?
Well, it's going to have to be a priority. Left to its own device, time will be filled somehow or another. And so for a lean culture to start, there's got to be that mindset in the leadership that this is something that has real potential, and that you make time for it. And I guess, a basic understanding, going to a webinar, having a consultant come in and spending a little time introducing the concepts and stuff like that. But then going through, like I said, setting up a Kaizen board and getting them involved and showing them that you trust them and that they are part of the practice, not just the grunt work, but the thinking part and the management part, and that they are valuable. So it's just like anything else. It's either a priority or it's not a priority. That answers the question, but.
Okay. Well, we are out of time, unfortunately, but I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank Chip for doing the presentation today. His email address is there, as well as you see the link to leanvets.com. Hope you'll come check that out and participate in that growing community. Carlos posted a comment here, Chip, saying, count me in for the community of practitioners. So hopefully you two can connect
yes.
others. So there you go. On behalf of the entire team at KaiNexus, thank you for attending the webinar. And as some of my colleagues tend to say at the end of these webinars, don't stop improving. Thanks.